This is a Chartres Cathedral. This is the entering the western portal. The portal of judgment is what it's known as. And it's loaded with symbolism. And like so many of these, there we go. We'll take a little closer look at it. And we see the figure of the seated Christ within this geometric form here that's known as the mystic almond. And he holds, it's been broken right there probably during the French Revolution when there was lots and lots of destruction and damage done to the great Gothic cathedrals. But the book was closed. And whenever the book was closed, it indicated that there was an esoteric tradition concealed there that was not yet, whose time had not yet come to be revealed to the world. In some of the imagery, you will see an open book. And the open book means that it's referring to an exoteric tradition whose time has come to be revealed to the world. We see four figures surrounding the mystic almond, which, by the way, is a geometric figure known as a vesica, which means vessel. It's also called a vesica piscis, which means vessel of the fish. And it is a particularly suitable symbol for the Piscean age, which the vernal equinox has been transiting for the last roughly 2,000 years. Around the mystic almond are four creatures. Who can identify them? We have an eagle. Bull, the lion, and the man. Yeah. Those are the four beasts that we find from the book of Revelations. We also find it in the book of the visions of Ezekiel. I believe I have it. The vesica and the four ages of the world. From the book of Revelations, it says, "After this I looked, and behold, a door was opened in heaven, and the first voice which I heard was, as it were, of a trumpet talking with me, which said, Come up hither, and I will shew thee things which must be hereafter. And immediately I was in the Spirit, and behold, a throne was set in heaven, and one sat upon the throne. And before the throne was a sea of glass like unto crystal. And in the midst of the throne and round about the throne were beasts full of eyes before and behind. And the first beast was like a lion, and the second beast like a calf, and the third beast had a face as a man, and the fourth beast was like a flying eagle." Now this is from the prophetic utterances of St. John the Divine as appeared in Apocalypsis, or the book of Revelation, or the Apocalypse. The book of Ezekiel has a very similar one. I won't read that to you because we're short of time. Here is another depiction of Christ within the mystic almond, surrounded by the same four creatures. Now, those creatures represent not only the four evangelicals, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, in pretty much in conventional Christian interpretation or belief. They also represent the four ages of the world. Now remember the circle with the cross in it, symbolizing not only the four sacred directions, north, south, east, and west, they also symbolize the four ages of the world, represented astronomically and geographically by the spring and fall equinoxes and the summer and winter solstices. But there's also a great year. Now that great year is divided traditionally into four parts. And if you've studied your astrology, you know that there are four fixed signs in the Zodiac. Who's an astrologer in here? What are the four fixed signs? Taurus the bull, Leo the lion, Aquarius the water bearer, and Scorpio. Right. Now, we don't see a scorpion up there, but we do see an eagle. And the reason is right next to this constellation of Scorpio is Aquila the eagle, which rises with Scorpio. Now, Scorpio was considered to have certain malignant influences, and for that reason it was not always incorporated into the symbolism. Instead, a quail of the eagle was substituted. And so what we have is 4 images representing the 4 periods within the great year. Now, how many of you guys have heard of that phrase, the great year, and know what it means? The great year is the next great cycle. When you hear talk about the age of Pisces and the age of Aquarius, and that sort of thing, followed by the age of Capricorn, age of Pisces, preceded by the age of Aries, which was preceded by the age of Taurus, etc., these are only understandable within the context of the great year. And the great year is essentially a motion of the Earth relative to the ecliptic plane that manifests itself approximately every 26,000 years. And if you look at this globe here, if I hold it up like this, you'll see that the axis has a tilt to it. You see, it's tilt. Now, when we opened this discussion tonight, you saw how the north and south polar axes of the Earth point to certain regions of the sky. The polar zenith, the 2 polar zeniths, which is the point exactly over the North Pole, the point exactly over the Southern Pole. You know that the North Polar axis is marked by Polaris. Well, we are in an epoch now where at the polar axis of the Earth in the sky, there's a star. But 13,000 years ago, that pole star was not, Polaris was not the pole star. The pole star was the star Vega. Now, the star Vega is actually found by measuring over 47 degrees from our current pole star. The reason for that is this orientation of the Earth in space is not constant. It's doing this. This is what it's doing. This axis is making this motion in space. And what it's doing is it's bringing the Earth into a constantly changing orientation to the celestial vault. It is this motion that causes Earth's equator and the 2 tropics, north the Tropic of Cancer, south the Tropic of Capricorn, to bob up and down with respect to the Earth's orbital plane. And this was the cosmic clock. When you know how to identify, and this is one of the things I really spend a lot of time in my classes trying to convey this comprehension to people, to be able to see and find and understand this precessional motion of the Earth's equinoxes, which are sliding along its orbital plane. And I'm not going to give you an explanation of it now. I'm only going to essentially define it. The position of the sun at the moment of spring equinox is not static. It's shifting in the sky by an amount equal to 50 seconds of arc per year, which is not a lot. If you imagine every circle divided into 360 degrees, every degree is broken up into 60 parts called minutes. Each of those little minute, hence the term minute, each of those little minute parts is further subdivided into a second order of minuteness, hence the word second. So you've got 60 seconds per minute, 60 minutes per degree, 360 degrees for the whole circle. Now, I said that the position of the sun at the spring equinox shifts to the west in the sky by 50 seconds of arc per year. What that means is it transits a distance equal to 1 degree in 72 years, essentially the average span of a human life. And therein lies the linkage between the cycle of a human life and the cycle of the great year. Now, as there is an analogy in the great year with the 12 months, which are the 12 signs of the Zodiac, the vernal equinox is like the hand of a clock, moving every 2,000, on average, a little more than 2,000 years it takes to transit each of the 12 signs and make a complete circuit around. So that 13,000 years from now, the pole star will once again be Vega. 13,000 years after that, we're back to Polaris, the North Star. The complete cycle takes 26,000 years. The sacred number of old that was recognized as defining that cycle was 25,920 years. That great year was divided into 4 seasons, just as our Earth-based year of one transit around the sun is divided into 4 seasons. There is a spring of the year, a summer, a fall, and a winter. In the great year, there is a spring, a summer, a fall, and a winter. And there is an analogy between these scales of events. And this is something I spend probably a whole class or two just getting into this whole concept of geometry and the timing and the chronologies of the great year, because it's very significant. Okay, now here's the thing. You've got this cosmic clock, which is the vernal equinox. If you can imagine a great hand of a clock, one end is pointing to the vernal equinox, which is now at the cusp of Pisces and Aquarius, and at the other end, it's pointing towards Leo. So, as it's turning, it's like a clock hand, and it takes 26,000 years, or 25,920 according to the sacred number, to make a complete cycle around. Okay, within that time, there are 4 seasons, and each of those 4 seasons is 1/4 of the cycle, which turns out to be 6,480 years. And each season is then divided into 3 months, which is 1/3 of 6,480 is 2,160. That's the average amount of time for each astrological month. Average, I say, because there's the average slice of the pie, and then there's the actual constellations themselves that vary significantly. For example, Aries is a small constellation, but right next to it, Pisces is spread out over a much bigger region of the sky. But on average, it's 2,160 years. And this defines what's known as the astrological month. It's also called the Platonic month. 3 of those months together forms a season. Now, what's the relevance to that? Well, the Earth is actually moving in that fashion as a result of the vectoral summation of all cosmic forces impinging on it at any given time. Primarily, the source of those forces is the sun, the secondary is the moon, but also the planets contribute a small amount to it. And all of those cycles working in tandem exert a force upon the Earth which works on the Earth's bulge because of the fact that the Earth is spinning in its axis like this. It bulges around the equator, and all of those combined, the vectoral summation of all those gravitational forces and other forces working on the irregular spheroidal geometry of the Earth keeps it in this motion like this. Well, the interesting thing about that is, and the ancients understood, was that that cycle of the Earth was an embedded cycle within a greater series of cycles that governed periodic motion on a scale that is normally invisible to us. They also knew that within that cycle, there were nodal points. Points, shall we say, of heightened susceptibility to things happening. Now, let's say that I put you out with a blindfold, and you start walking, and you're walking out near 285. And you've got a blindfold, and you stumble out across the freeway, and you walk across it, and suddenly a car comes along, and boom! That's it. It's all over. They're scraping up your remains off the freeway. Well, maybe you're lucky, and maybe you're out there at 4:30 in the morning rather than 4:30 in the afternoon. Well, when you cross that highway at 4:30 in the morning, the probabilities of you getting struck by something are considerably less than if you were trying to cross it at 4:30 in the afternoon. You might, even without a blindfold at 4:30 in the afternoon, you might not be able to cross it. Well, what the ancients understood, in the Hebrew Kabbalah there's a word, Maseroth, to describe what I'm now about to explain to you, is there are a series of cosmic highways. And Earth periodically crosses these cosmic highways. There are cosmic intersections, if you will. And it'd be like if you're out walking across a nice big field, your chances of getting struck by something are pretty remote. But once you wander out of that field, While that short period of time that you're walking across the road, suddenly the probabilities are drastically different than they are the rest of the time. Earth is in a vast cycle with many periodicities and subcycles within it. And there are things going on in those subcycles, and like I said to open this lecture tonight, I was talking to you about cosmic forces impinging upon the Earth, and that we have to recognize that the Earth is actually part of a cosmic ecology. Now, within the great year, there are these points of susceptibility or points of vulnerability, where Earth is susceptible to things happening. And this was the most critical insight that the ancients were trying to convey with this model of the great year, is that it really gives us a model for the periodicities of the great catastrophes. And as it turns out, interestingly enough, within the great year, there are 4 points of susceptibility where the Earth is more vulnerable. This does not mean that necessarily something's going to happen. What it does mean is that for a short period of cosmic time, the Earth is more susceptible to outside influence and forces than it is otherwise. Now, if this turns out to be true and scientifically demonstrable, which I would argue that it is, it would behoove us to understand where these nodal points actually are within the system and where Earth is within that system. This would be probably the most critical insight to be derived from this knowledge. And this is where modern scientific discoveries and ancient traditional knowledge can come together in perfect compatibility, because modern science is teaching us more and more now about the nature of the cosmic environment. And as we once imagined it, even a few generations ago, just essentially an empty void of space, we now know that the cosmic environment is densely inhabited with all kinds of matter and energy. And that matter and that energy influences and affects the conditions of life down here on the surface of this planet. So the ancients, they bequeathed to us a legacy of prophecy. And what those prophecies were describing was not only the potentialities that existed in our future, but the actualities that had actually transpired in the past as Earth entered these susceptible zones. Well, all of the evidence points to the conclusion I think you were probably all thinking that I'm going to come to, which is that we are now entering, if not already in, a susceptible zone, a vulnerable time. Now, there are certain indications, coming events, this is what the prophets and the shamans always understood, is that coming events cast their shadows before them. And if you're paying attention, sometimes you will see the shadows of coming events flickering out of the corner of your eye. But if you're not paying attention, if you're consumed in all of the distractions and trivialities of everyday life, you probably won't notice. But of course, the human race has progressed forward always because of the roughly 5 or less percent that have been striving to take notice. The 5% that are essentially awake while their fellow man continues to slumber on. We see the Buddha within the same vesica figure. The vesica is the symbol of the cosmic porthole between worlds. It's also the symbol of the womb, because the womb is most certainly a portal between worlds. It's how our souls came into this material plane in the first place. Buddha within the vesica. And there we see the cover of the Chalice Well at Glastonbury, England. And you'll see right there the geometric exercise by which we create the vesica. 2 overlapping circles such that the circumference of one falls on the center of the other and vice versa. And then the overlap of the 2, we have the vesica. This is the key. Once we've created the vesica, we can now, from that, generates prolifically out all of the patterns of sacred geometry, both 2-dimensional and 3-dimensional. This is what it starts with. 2 circles laid out on a straight line. And from that vesica, we can then proceed to manifest the whole remarkable edifice of sacred geometry.